Welcome to our continuing series of virtual voices, focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Our speakers today are from universities of Ukraine. The first is Yulia Zadorovna. She was born in Lviv. She is a fourth-year student at the Faculty of Journalism. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, she has been involved in volunteer activities and covering news related to the war. The next speaker is Lilia Klimovich. She's a student of Faculty of Law, Humanities, and Social Sciences of the Mikhailo Ostrogradsky National Universities of Kremenchuk. She provides assistance to the armed forces of Ukraine, supports the army with donations and humanitarian support collections. The third speaker is Anastasia Ishko. She was born in the Lviv region and is currently studying at the Faculty of Journalism of Ivan Franko National University. Anastasia actively contributed to the donations to the army and participating in local events to support the Ukrainian armed forces. Finally, we have Victoria Klus. She was born and raised in Lviv, Ukraine, studies journalism at the Lviv National University. She spreads and studies issues on Ukrainian culture, supports Ukrainian artists, and shares the information about the war in social media, and also helps the armed forces of Ukraine with donations. Our moderator is Susie Halak. We will begin with Yulia Zadorovna. Yulia, can you please begin your presentation?
Okay, today I will be talking about how the media is covering the negotiations on the war in Ukraine and the past to peace of seeds of war. Russia launched a war in Ukraine in 2014 years when it occupied Crimea and part of the Donbass. For most Ukrainians, this has become part of adulthood, but for me and my peers, Russian aggression lasts almost the all conscious life. We Ukrainians young grow in conditions of threat, loss, and constant struggle. But at the same time, we grow up with an understanding of the value of freedom, with the realization that our generation has a voice and the right to form a country's position. We have the simple questions: what is peace? And when we talk about peace in the world, we ask under that conditions, because for us, peace is not just a lack of shelling, it is a guarantee of security, justice, and the future. It's not an argument synced under pressure, but the result of the struggle in which we have already paid too high price. In this report, I want to explain how we see the war and possible negotiations, how these issues are covered in Ukrainian and foreign media, and why it is important that the world hear us, young Ukrainians who do not expect that someone will decide our fate and they will choose their future. And with the beginnings of Russia's invasion of the territory of Ukraine, the life of each Ukrainian has changed and has become new. And the full-scale invasion of Russian troops into Ukraine brought bloodshed and crossed the dreams of many young people. Attitude to peace: why Ukrainians do not agree to compromise. Attitude to peace in Ukrainian society, especially among young people, is formed by the experience of a real cruel war. And we clearly discussion true peace from peace on paper and does not guarantee security. We do not want peace at any cost. We want peace that means the end of threats, not a pause before a new attack. And young people do not support the idea of negotiations that imply Russia's consensus and the transfer of territories, recognition of annexion or ignoring war crimes is not a compromise, it is surrendered. And after Bucha, Irpin, Mariupol, we cannot and have no moral right to agree to the peace based or on impunity. And for us, peace is complete withdrawal of Russian troops from all occupied territories, security guarantees from future attack, is responsibility of Russia for crimes, its return prisoners and deported, is preservation of Ukraine's sovereignty and within the internationally recognized borders. And it is not maximalism as someone sometimes served in Western discourse. It's a requirement of justice because it was the absence that caused this war. For Ukrainian young, peace is not the result of negotiations with the aggressor, but the result of victory over aggression. Only in this way will be able to talk about the future. Our generation is clearly articulated. We do not stop just the fighting. We demand guarantees, is security, independence, stable and free future. And I have many friends from different parts of Ukraine, from Kharkiv, Kherson, from Mykolaiv, and they were forced to leave their homes, lose their usual life, evacuate from shelling. Someone lost the house, someone loved ones. And for them, the word peace does not mean simply silence. It means returning home. And it means that no one will tell them what language to speak, under what flag to live, from whom to love, whom to be afraid. For our generation, war is not the event on the forefront. It is an information space in which we live daily. It is the media, both Ukrainian and foreign, form an idea of what is happening, who is guilty, and what means peace. And how foreign media talk about peaceful negotiations. Foreign media actively cover the topic of potential peaceful talks between Ukraine and Russia, but rhetoric in their materials often fluctuates between rhetoric in their materials is pragmatism and optimism. Some publications the threats of negotiations that Russia can use as a tool for delaying war or imposing its conditions. At the same time, publication, for example, in The Guardian or in the statements of individual Western politicals who cover this media without critical analysis, an idea that peace is possible due to compromise on both sides, and is here that there is a danger of false perception. If you do not explain the context, such as submission can create in the international audience the impression that Ukrainians do not want peace or delay the war. And therefore, it is important that foreign media breaks its topics is really deserved as attention. And proper coverage of Ukraine's position is only the matter of justice. It is also the basis for the information of real international solidarity, which is not based on political maneuvers. Rhetoric of Ukrainian media consistently broadcast a critical but balanced position on the topics of peace talks. Most materials are clearly articulated. Negotiations are possible only on condition that do not contradict national interest and do not undermine Ukrainians' sovereignty. And a characteristic of a feature of Ukrainian information field in the focus not on negotiations as such, but on who, under what conditions they are initiated. And media publications analyze not only the statements of the Russian side, but also the context. Is attacks is all that Russian army do in Ukraine. And that why is the materials of the Ukrainian media often appears the formulation peace on the condition of Ukraine, not a slogan, but is a result of conscious attitude to war and existential challenge. And for us, we have a clear answer. True peace cannot be based on illusion. It is possible only after complete stopping of aggression, branding the precipitation responsible and providing Ukraine with real security guarantees. The issue of peace for Ukrainians is not a moral dilemma, but a matter for survival. During the war, we have landed to siren in intention from the diplomatic rhetoric. The world's learned from real actions. We no longer trust the promises that are not supported by responsibility, security, and specific guarantees. And discussion about negotiations often sound that Ukrainians are simply not ready to compromise, but in reality, we just know the price of this compromise very well. We do not need to invent hypothetical scenarios. We have already seen that what truth looks like and scout in world and broken in the practice. And that is why, before talking about peace, we ask the question, what do you mean by this work? And because it is important for us not to name the state of things peace, but to make it not mean a new form of war. And it is critical moment that it was realizing. Is peace possible in the current circumstances? And ask if peace with Russia is possible. Ukrainian young are inscrolling replying, no, if the price of this peace is the same as the price of truth. And the figure alone illustrates the scale of the problem. In 22 days of the so-called energy truce, Russia made at least 8 attacks on civilian objects in Ukraine, and 72 people is to be killed, and this almost in 2 times more than in the previous 22 days before the truce. And this data published by the Center of Combating Misinformation clearly demonstrates that even a conditional peace is, in the Russian sense, is the conventional and of the world with other methods. And therefore, the question is not whether Ukrainians want peace in obvious. The question is, can this be a peace that accompanied by and in scare by the number of killed civilians? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Yulia, for a very informative and very important presentation. And we will now move to Lilia Klimovich.
Good afternoon. My name is Lilia Klimovich. I am student of Kremlin-Mikhailo Ostrogradsk National University. Today, I will review a very relevant and actually topic for today. This is why a ceasefire is a threat, a youth perspective. Ukrainians have suffered from Russian aggression for centuries, from imperial conquest to Soviet repression and modern war. History shows that any attempt to negotiation with Russia don't lead to real peace. Since the times of the Cossack campaigns, we know that Moscow constantly violated agreements with the Hetmanate that destroyed millions of Ukrainians during the Holodomor, repressions, and deportation. Modern mass crimes, terror, genocide, and atrocities committed by the Russian army against the civilian population prove that the Kremlin's policy is aggressive and predictable. The abduction of children, attacks on civilian infrastructure, torture chambers in occupied territories, all this is not an accident, but a perceivable strategy to destroy Ukraine as a state. Therefore, a ceasefire without a real mechanism of guarantees will only preserve the conflict, but not resolve it. Any truce without strict mechanism of control and responsibility of the aggressor will become another trap, allowing Russia to restore its strength and prepare for a new escalation. Ukraine and the international community must take into account historical experience and avoid repeating the mistakes that have already cost millions of people their lives and freedom. Why is ceasefire not a solution to the problem? Firstly, it is maintain the threat. Russia has repeatedly used temporary ceasefires to regroup forces and build up military resources. An example is the Minsk agreements, which did not lead a sustainable peace, but only allowed the aggressor to strengthen its position. After signing these agreements, the Kremlin not only didn't stop military operation, but also intensified its activities in the information, economic, and military direction to prepare for a full-scale invasion in 2022 year. Secondly, it is frozen conflict. If the war is simply frozen without a real solution to the problem, it will create an analog of Transnistria, Abkhazia, or South Ossetia. Russia traditionally uses the tactic of frozen conflicts to maintain control over territories and influence the domestic and foreign policy of countries that become its victims. Such a situation will leave Ukraine in constant danger and will make full integration into European and Euro-Atlantic structures impossible. In addition, the frozen conflict creates economic, social, and political challenges and problems. The constant stress of war will deter investors and hinder economic growth and infrastructure's development. Millions of Ukrainians who were forced to leave their homes died fighting will not be able to return home, leading to prolonged humanitarian problems. Moreover, the frozen conflict will become a tool of influence for the Kremlin, allowing it to interfere in Ukraine's internal affairs, divert society, and weaken the state from within. Besides this is loss of territories and sovereignty. A ceasefire under the current condition would mean de facto recognition of the occupation of part of Ukrainian lands. This would be a serious geopolitical precedent that could inspire all the authoritarian regimes to pursue aggressive policies, demonstrating that the forcible seizure of territories can remain unpunished. In this case, not only Ukraine, but also other states bordering Russia will be threatened by similar scenarios. This will make long-term stability impossible and will become a constant source of tension. Moreover, the occupation is accompanied by repression, Russification, and persecution of the civilian population, which leads to the destruction of national identity and mass violations of human rights. And, of course, is psychology's effect. Peace through temporary compromises with the aggressor has profound negative consequences from society. It demotivates society and the military who sacrificed their lives to protect the state. Such a situation can create a sense of injustice and distrust in one's own states and society. At the international level, a ceasefire without Ukraine's victory can weaken support from allies. Western partners may perceive this as the end of the conflict and reduce the level of assistance. This will create the illusion of peace, although in reality the war will continue in a hidden form. This is through sabotage, economic pressure, and political destabilization. Now talk about the historical experience of negotiations with Russia. Ukraine has repeatedly tried to reach an agreement with Russia through diplomatic channels, but these attempts usually led to even greater escalation. This country systematically uses negotiations to gain time, spread disinformation, and prepare for further aggression. The first example is Budapest Memorandum in 1994. The agreement was signed by Ukraine, Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Ukraine gave up the world's third largest number arsenal in exchange for guarantees of territorial integrity and sovereignty. However, in 2014, Russia violated its obligation by occupying Crimea and started a war in Donbass. This became a vivid example of how Moscow ignores international treaties when it is beneficial to it. Secondly, it is a Minsk agreements in 2014-2015. After active fighting in Donbass, Ukraine was forced to agree to the Minsk agreements, and the document provided for a ceasefire, prisoner exchange, and special status for the occupied territories. However, Russia has not fulfilled its obligation and has used the Minsk agreements to freeze the conflict, maintain its influence in Donbass, and prepare for a full-scale invasion in 2022. The next example is Ilovaisk Cauldron. Russia promised a safe corridor for Ukrainian troops to leave, but as a result, Russian troops opened fire on Ukrainian columns, resulting in massive casualties among Ukrainian defenders. This case is an example of the cynical use of the negotiation process for a military trap. And the Istanbul negotiation, following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 year, several rounds of talks took place, including in Belarus and Turkey. The most significant were the talks in Istanbul, where Ukraine put forward a proposal for security guarantees. However, Moscow used the process for information manipulation and to strengthen its position on the battlefield, and the Russian representative had no real interest in a peaceful settlement. Now, let's talk about the need for a regional security system. The frozen conflict poses a threat not only to Ukraine but also to all of Europe. Against the backdrop of growing tension and uncertainty about Russia's further actions, Ukraine needs to build an effective regional security system that should take into account both military and economic, political, and informational aspects. To ensure stability, it is necessary to first deepen cooperation with NATO and Europe. Only the full integration of Ukraine into these structures can guarantee long-term security. NATO and Europe are the main guarantors of peaceful coexistence and security on the European continent. Cooperation with them allows Ukraine not only to receive military assistance, but also to contribute to economic and infrastructural modernization and create a stable basis for development. Also, this is form new alliances, regional alliances, for example, the Baltic Black Sea Belt, where Ukraine could unite with the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, and other Central and Eastern European states, can become an additional factor in deterring an aggressor. Such alliances not only strengthen defense capabilities, but also contribute to the development of economic ties and cultural interaction between countries, which helps to create a united front in the fight against external threats. And of course, creates an effective deterrence system. Strengthen defense capabilities through the modernization of Ukraine armed force and deploying international military contingents at critical points, such as Ukraine's southern and eastern borders, will help prevent a recurrence of aggression. International peacekeeping forces can act as a guarantee of stability and peacekeeping on the territory of Ukraine. All in all, a ceasefire without clear security guarantees and real punishment of the aggressor carries risk for both Ukraine and the whole of Europe. Historical experience shows that compromises with Russia only work in the Kremlin's favor. Russia has repeatedly violated peace agreements signed in the past and used them as a tool to regroup its forces and further expand its territorial ambitions. In addition, the lack of serious sanctions or punishment for violating peace agreements only encourages further aggression and instability. That is why the key task of the international community should be not only to stop the fighting, but also to create a long-term security system that will prevent similar scenarios from recurring in the future. To do this, it is necessary to clearly determine that compromises that lead to a weakening of security cannot be accepted, and the international community must actively support Ukraine in its quest to restore sovereignty and territorial integrity. Without proper measures and strategies, the risk of aggression will remain, and new wars will only be a matter of time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Lilia, for a very, very informative and important presentation. And we will now move on to Anastasia Ishko.
My topic for today is why it's important to donate to the army and how can we show our support. Today, I want to talk about something that touches us all, no matter where we stand on this earth, why donating to the army is crucial and how we can show our support for those who defend not just land, but the very idea of freedom. This isn't about numbers or weapons, it's about people, courage, and the choice we all have to make a difference. First, let's ask, why does donating matter? Imagine a soldier on the front line, exhausted, cold, tired, maybe even hungry. Their radio's broken, their bandages are gone, and the enemy's closing in. Now imagine your donation, maybe $10. Buy them a warm jacket, a first aid kit, or a drone to spot danger. That's not just money, that's survival. Armies need more than bravery. They need equipment, food, medicine. When we give, we're not funding a faceless force, we're keeping our protectors standing. One small act can save a life, protect a town, and hold a nation together. In places like Ukraine, where war has raged since 2022, every coin keeps the fight alive. Ending the war in Ukraine is a complex challenge that demands a multifaceted approach rooted in diplomacy, economic pressure, and humanitarian focus. International leaders must prioritize sustained diplomatic engagement, bringing Russia, Ukraine, and key global powers like the United States, China, and the European Union to the table. Diplomacy should aim for incremental progress, starting with prisoner exchanges and safe corridors, rather than an all-or-nothing resolution building trust over time. Second, economic leverage remains critical. Strengthening and enforcing sanctions on Russia's energy exports and military supply chains could strain its war effort, while offering conditional relief tied to verifiable withdrawals. Simultaneously, bolstering Ukraine's economy through aid and reconstruction commitments signals resilience, reducing Russia's hope of outlasting its opponent. Finally, the human cost must drive urgency, amplifying humanitarian aid, food, medical supplies, and shelter for displaced Ukrainians, alongside global campaigns to highlight civilian suffering, can pressure all sides to reconsider entrenched positions. Military solutions alone perpetuate destruction. Peace hinges on blending pragmatic negotiations with unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and people. Time is the enemy. Action must be swift and persistent. But it's deeper than that. Donating is a shout into the void. You're not alone. Soldiers don't beg for praise. They march on quietly, risking everything. Our gifts tell them we see their sacrifice, that we're in this together. And this isn't just a local fight, it's political too. When a country like Russia invades, it's not just about borders. It's about power, control, and silencing a people's voice. Donating to Ukraine's army, for example, isn't just charity. It's a stand against tyranny, a vote for democracy. Every dollar we send says, we reject aggression, we choose freedom. That's why foreigners can and should join in too. This war echoes beyond Ukraine. It's a test for the world. If you're watching from abroad, your support can tip the scales. Let me share a story about someone real to me now. His name is Alexander, a 29-year-old mechanic from near Sumy, Ukraine. Before 2022, he was fixing cars, saving up for his own shop. When Russia rolled in, he traded his ranch for a gun, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Early in the war, his unit was pinned down in a freezing forest, no coats, no heat. They were losing hope until a donation drive from locals and a few foreigners in Poland sent them blankets and a generator. Alexander posted online, "I thought we would be forgotten." Then those boxes arrived and it was like the world cared. That aid, partly from strangers abroad, kept him warm and fighting. He's still out there holding the line because people like us don't look away. So how do we show our support? Donating cash is the heartbeat of it. For Ukrainians, it's funds to groups like the Armed Forces support campaigns. For foreigners, yes, you're listening from the US, UK, or anywhere. Your dollars can buy drones, vests, or meals through platforms like United 24 or local drives. But it's not all money. Write a letter, tell Alexander he's your hero, share his story online, spark a conversation, or host a fundraiser, a coffee sale, a car wash. Small stuff adds up. If you can give, wear a ribbon, light a candle, or just talk about them. These acts bridge the gap between us and them. Foreigners, hear this. You don't need to be Ukrainian to care. This isn't their war alone. It's a global fight against aggression. Putin's tanks don't just threaten Kyiv, they challenge the idea that nations can choose their path. Your donation, even $5, is a brick in the wall against that. You're not outsiders, you're allies. Platforms like Come Back Alive welcome international help, and every bit strengthens not just an army, but a democracy under fire. Why does this matter? Without support, armies falter, and with them, our safety and values crumble. Politically, it's a signal. We won't let bullies win. Personally, it's about Alexander and thousands like him. Ordinary people turned warriors, counting on us. Donating isn't a chore, it's an honor. It ties us to them across borders and oceans. So let's act today. Locals, give what you can. Foreigners, join us. Your support matters as much as ours. A dollar, a word, a story shared, it all builds something unbreakable. This isn't just about war, it's about who we are when the world's watching. Let's show our army and the world that we stand tall together. It's not about how much we give, but that we give at all. Because in the end, supporting our army isn't just about winning a war. It's about honoring the people who make our peace possible. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Anastasia. And now we will move on to our last presenter, Victoria Klus.
Yeah, hello everyone. Let me know if you see my presentation.
Yes, I do.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. My today's topic is the environmental cost of war for Ukraine. Today, I will talk not only as a student, but also as a representative of a generation affected by the ongoing war in Ukraine. The voice of youth is important, and we want to be heard. Despite facing daily attacks and challenges, we remain strong and believe that our perspectives can help shape a better future. While discussions often center around geopolitical strategies and military tactics, today I want to shed light on an often overlooked aspect: the environmental devastation caused by war and how it shapes our vision for a just and lasting peace. The environmental toll of war. The Russia-Ukraine war has severely impacted biodiversity, especially in areas of heavy fighting and occupation. Destruction of habitats, pollution, and the disruption of protected areas have threatened wildlife, forests, and biodiversity. Over 3 million hectares of Ukrainian forests have been damaged due to fires, shelling, and pollution. This destruction has led to the collapse of river ecosystems and the extinction of rare species. Soil and agriculture. Ukraine's fertile Chernozem soils have been poisoned with heavy metals and chemicals from explosions, rendering vast agricultural areas unfit for cultivation. Air and water pollution. Explosions and military activities have released toxic substances into the air and water, posing long-term health risks to both humans and wildlife. Nuclear threats. Zaporizhia and Chernobyl. Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest nuclear facility located in Ukraine, remains under Russian control. The plant has suffered damage, including drone attacks, and faces critical safety issues such as damaged power lines and cooling systems. Locals in Nikopol now fear the silhouettes of the 6 nuclear reactors that loom over the river, the outlines of a facility they say has transformed into a military base that attacks them and no longer produces the energy the country needs to survive. In this context, we also should remember Chernobyl experience. Russian military activities have reached the highly radioactive Chernobyl area, raising global concerns about nuclear safety. A recent drone strike damaged the protective structure covering the ruined reactor, igniting fears of radiation leakage. Landmines, a lingering danger. Ukraine has become the most heavily mined country in the world, with approximately 30% of its territory contaminated by landmines and unexploded ordnance. This not only endangers civilians, but also hampers agricultural activities and ecological restoration efforts. The global environmental impact. The environmental consequences of the war extend beyond Ukraine's borders. Carbon emissions. The conflict has resulted in significant greenhouse gas emissions, undermining global climate goals. The destruction of infrastructure and increased military activities contribute to this environmental burden. Transboundary pollution. Toxic substances released during the war have the potential to contaminate air and water sources in neighboring countries, posing regional environmental and health risks. As young Ukrainians, we recognize that any peace agreement must address the environmental devastation caused by war as well. Accepting a peace deal without clear guarantees for safety would disregard the immense sacrifices made and the long-term consequences we face. The environmental cost of war in Ukraine is staggering and will have lasting effects on our national health, economy, and future. As we contemplate peace, it's imperative that environmental considerations are central to any agreement. Our generation demands a peace that not only ends the war, but also commits to healing the land and ensuring a sustainable future for all. However, as we all know, we can't just trust Russia because the appetite comes with eating, and appetites of Russia are way beyond Ukraine. Russia's recent attacks on Ukrainian cities once again prove that trusting the aggressor in peace negotiations is both dangerous and naive. Just in the past week, Russia has launched over 1,000 aerial bomb strikes, nearly 670 attack drones, and more than 30 different types of missiles targeting Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Odessa. Also, Russia launched a ballistic missile attack on Kryvyi Rih, killing 14 people and injuring 50. 6 children are among dead. At least 32 people were killed and 84 others were wounded by a Russian ballistic missile strike in the heart of Sumy on Sunday morning of April 13th. Since the beginning of the war, according to Zelensky, Russia has already killed 13,000 Ukrainian civilians, including more than 600 children. Russia does not respect legal obligations or global norms, and any peace deal proposed by such an actor cannot be trusted without clear and enforceable security guarantees. That's why Ukrainian youth strongly oppose a peace agreement that lacks clarity and accountability. A so-called peace that involves making concessions to an aggressor who continues to bomb civilian infrastructure, destroy the environment, and violate human rights is not peace by surrender. True peace can only come with justice, security guarantees, and restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Victoria, for another excellent presentation. And now we will move on to our moderator, Susie Hallock. Over to you, Susie.
Thank you, Dr. Durbach, and thank you to all the presenters. Our first question is for Lilia. What pattern can be seen in Ukraine's attempts to negotiate with Russia throughout history?
Can you repeat, please?
What pattern can be seen in Ukraine's attempts to negotiate with Russia throughout history?
I believe that in order for Russian aggression not to be repeated after the ceasefire, it is necessary to take a number of measures aimed at stabilizing the situation and ensuring sustainable peace, both by Ukraine and the world community. Ukraine must improve our army, support it, and strengthen it. Also, Ukraine must invest in the development, provision, and support of the army in the states of combat readiness.
The next question is for Yulia. In your opinion, how does the understanding of peace among young people and the older generation differ?
Can you repeat, please?
In your opinion, how does the understanding of peace among young people and the older generation differ?
Okay, thank you for your question. Yes, in many cases, it is natural. The older generation often remembers Soviet ideas about peace as lack of war or as stability, and yet perceives peace not as a state of rest, but as a space of opportunity to live, to create, to be themselves. And for young Ukrainians, peace without freedoms is no longer peace, and therefore their position of negotiations is often more categorical, because it is not to return or to the past, but about creating their future.
Thank you for your response. Next question is for Anastasia. How does donating to the army help soldiers and their families?
Thank you for your question. So I would say that you can like donating helps soldier and their families by providing money for important things. For example, food. It can be clothing, school supplies for their children, and safe places where they can live. And it can also help families when a soldier is away for a long time, or he has been hurt or something like happened to him. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Victoria. How has the war in Ukraine affected wildlife and biodiversity?
Thank you for your question. Well, like I said, it affects wildlife very negatively, because we already can see that some of rare species are dying. The toxic emissions are spreading among all the territory of Ukraine, so it will keep decreasing if the war doesn't stop.
Thank you. The next question back to Lilia. Which major agreements and events between Ukraine and Russia are listed, and when did they happen?
Thank you for your question. There are many historical examples when compromises with Russia's aggressive policy did not lead to peace. In my presentation, I cite several of these agreements. For example, Ilowai's Cauldron, mixed agreements, Budapest Memorandum. This experience proves that Russia cannot be trusted.
Thank you. Next question is for Yulia. do you think can a real peace be the result of a compromise? If so, where is the limit of the acceptable compromise? Julia?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that compromise is not we cannot say that that is the good idea for all for everything conflicts, because the war is not a simple thing, and we know that we have a very blood war, and war it's the diets, war is the lives of people, and we not can move that peace is very simple, and because war it is very strange thing, and we all watch what Russian army do on Ukrainian territory, and we can talk that compromise is the best things that we have to argue with that.
You. Next question is for Anastasia. What are some ways donations can improve the lives? Oh, I think you already answered this one. What does supporting Ukraine mean to you personally? Has this changed since 2022?
I can say that from my perspective, I can like tell you more about local events like in Lviv, where I have been. And the first one is European Youth Capital 2025, and as part of its designation as the European Youth Capital, Lviv is hosting various events like through 2025 to foster European solidarity and support for Ukraine. And these initiatives aim to engage youth in activities that promote resilience and unity during challenging times. The second one is UNESCO's Lviv Culture Hub, also very interesting. Established with support from UNESCO, the Lviv Culture Hub serves as a center for cultural exchange and support, and it offers different workshops, conferences, exhibitions, including arts and culture therapy programs. For example, it can be victims of the war, contributing to the well-being of those who are affected from our war.
Thank you. Next question is for Victoria. How does the environmental impact of the war affect future generations?
Well, we have to understand that everything that happens right now in our country, it is not the thing for like 5 or 10 or even 20 years. It will last way longer, because we are talking about not only air and water pollutions, we are also talking about our landmines and about our agriculture. And I think that we will have to work on it for a long time to clear our land from all these things.
Thank you. Next question is for Lilia. Can the freezing of the conflict be considered a victory for any of the parties?
Can I take time? I need to think about this question.
Yeah. Julia, do you think that Ukrainian media are objective enough in presenting the topic of peace and negotiations?
Thank you for your question. I think that Ukrainian media work in exceptional conditions in a full-scale war. Their task is not only to inform, but also to protect the information front. and therefore it is impossible to expect absolute neutrality. But in general, they demonstrate professionalism and responsibility in the topic of peace, and they clearly separate what is a real dialogue and what in manipulative initiatives by the aggressor. And many publications critically evaluate both foreign statements and Ukrainian political messages, trying to keep the balance between trust and patriotism.
Thank you. Next question for Anastasia. What form of help do you think is underestimated but critically important?
I think that there's like some specific types of aid that are like most needed for us, for Ukrainians. It can be medical supplies, it can be food, shelter, as I mentioned in my presentation. And the war in Ukraine has created like urgent needs for millions of people, including refugees. It can be internationally displaced persons and those in conflict zones, those who are our warriors. And specific types of aid, such as I mentioned, medical supplies, food, shelter, and more, are critical to support those affected. And for example, hospitals, clinics, frontline responders face shortages of critical medical supplies due to ongoing attacks on infrastructure. And I can say that mental health support is also vital, as many Ukrainians, especially youth, children, they are experiencing trauma.
Thank you. For Victoria, why is it important to not only have a ceasefire, but to address the root causes of the war?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Why is it important to not only have a ceasefire, but to address root causes of the war?
Well, because first of all, we need to understand if we're talking in the context of the Russia, if we're talking about its motives, just stopping the fire won't stop the whole problem, because the issue is way deeper and it lingers way longer than just terms from the starting of the invasion in our country. So we need some guarantees, and we need to change the system of the government of the Russia to stop the war.
Thank you. Lilia, what measures should be taken to ensure the aggression does not recur after the ceasefire?
Thank you for the question. Weapons from the IS, in my opinion, are good, but Ukrainians must produce weapons themselves, because as experience shows, guarantees don't always work. And it is clear that Ukrainians cannot cope with this invasion alone. It is very good that Europeans understand that their security and identity depends on Ukraine. That Ukrainians defend not only themselves, but also the countries of Europe. And we need to move away from the concept and the idea that foreign armies will come to protect us, and Europeans need to take care of their security by joining forces. We must understand that the front with Russia begins with the Scandinavian countries, and therefore the unification of financial power and exempt military industrial system, mobilization potential, the economy of the Scandinavian, Baltic and European countries will make this front unified, and Putin will never risk attacking again. We need to involve countries that understand that if Ukraine does not halt, Russia will go to war against them, and the security of these countries now depends of Ukraine.
Thank you. Yulia, what is the role of the youth, including journalism students, in the formation of information culture in war conditions?
Thank you for the question. It is a generation that not only consensus information, it creates it, and journalism students in the conditions of war become part of a great conversation about the trust, memory, and the future, and they are those who shoot documentaries, keep pages, write reports from frontline cities, works in a local media, and they form a new journalistic ethics, not removed but involved. And their works is not just about the profession, it's about values, and so about the country's information country in times of the most acute test.
Thank you. Anastasia, how can someone ensure their donations to the war relief efforts are used effectively?
Thank you for your question. So I would recommend to choose organizations that openly share how they use their funds. You can visit their website, like to find some financial reports. You can also project updates or specific examples of their work. And for instance, it may be Razum for Ukraine provides, it's a website that provides detailed breakdowns, such as delivering tons of medical supplies to over 4,000 medical facilities, if I mentioned it correctly.
Thank you. Victoria, how real do you think the threat of a large-scale accident in Zaporizhzhia is?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
How real do you think the threat of a large-scale accident in Zaporizhzhia is?
Well, I haven't really understood the second part of the question. Maybe you can rephrase it.
It's the question from the audience is, how real do you think the threat of a large-scale accident in Zaporizhzhia is?
Sorry, I can't really answer that question right now.
We can go to the next question. How does the war affect the global ecosystem?
Well, we need to understand that if we're talking about the ecosystem and about emissions, we cannot like simply just build a wall between Ukraine and other countries to stop it from spreading. It will spread anyway through the water, through the air, and it will spread to other countries. So it is inevitable.
Thank you. Next question for Lilia. Why can peace under the term of a ceasefire be temporary but not permanent?
Thank you for the question. Peace in the terms of ceasefire with Russia is guaranteed to be a trap that Russia wants to drag Ukraine into, because Russia remains an aggressor, an attacker, a rapist, an empire that cannot live without fighting. They seek to subjugate other people and to rise in their identity. Even if the fire is stopped for a while, it is obvious that the Russians will accumulate forces and people for another attempt to attack Ukraine and conquer it.
you. Yulia, do you remember the moment when you realized that compromise is not always peace?
Can you repeat, please?
Do you remember the moment when you realized that compromise is not always peace?
Maybe cultural inventors plays a key role in shaping in the international idea of Ukrainian vision of peace. And we young people, we see the peace that we have chance of the independence, the future in independence country and our peaceful future.
You, Anastasia, how can young people help if they don't own their own money?
I would say that they can just they can do something like share some photos. They can share a story on their social media. It can be like a Facebook story, Instagram story, or they can just make some short videos about what's going on in Ukraine right now and post it on TikTok for make it viral, for example. So we can not just like donate with the money, but we could also donate with our energy, our words, and the truth that we spread beyond our young Ukrainians and the older one.
Thank you. And then lastly, Victoria, how can we ensure that the environmental issues aren't forgotten after the war?
Well, in my opinion, they will not be forgotten because even after the war, it will affect us in all the ways. Like I said before, we will have our land is polluted with landmines, and we will have to clean it all. Also, we will have to clean the air and the water. So it is it will be crucial for us to not forget about it.
Thank you very much. I'll turn back to Dr. Durbach to close out.
Thank you very, very much, Susie, for moderating. And thank you very much to all of you for wonderful presentations. And all I can say that all of us wish you strength and resilience at this very, very difficult time for Ukraine and of course for you. So we are very grateful that you had the time to participate with us. And we wish you the best for the future, both for Ukraine and you individually. Have a very good week. Take care. Goodbye.